All right, folks, I'm back with another installment of what I saw at court today with David. It was a crazy day. So if you saw the last video that I did, I explained how the first witness that was called was essentially a police officer that had done a sort of welfare check or a search on one of David's properties looking for Celeste on February the 17th, 2024. And the second witness that was called was one of the detectives from the LAPD Robbery Homicide Division. Now, I do have the names, but I'm not going to read the names because I got in trouble for showing some information I shouldn't have yesterday. So don't worry about the names, but I was there, I see it, I confirmed it with my own eyes, and you can believe me, it doesn't matter which cop that it was, but essentially that's what it was. So it was basically a detective from the Robbery Homicide Division, somebody with 12 years in the Robbery Homicide Division, a career with the LAPD for 26 years. I'm not going to lie, he looked pretty good. He looked pretty young and fresh for somebody that's done 26 years on the force. He was clearly a veteran, but he looked pretty young and sharp. So for respect to him, I won't say his name, but he was looking dapper. So shout out to him. All right, hopefully I never come across him in any other scenario because that would be bad news. But anyway, he basically would explain that he was in the Homicide Special Unit, which is a special unit in the Homicide Division of the Robbery Homicide section of the force, who basically specifically investigate serious crimes of a special nature. That includes crimes against other police officers, incidents where 3+ murders have happened in the same incident. High-profile homicides and complex homicides, and I would say this definitely falls in the last two. So he would explain who his partner was on this case, another cop with 8 to 10 years as experience, with them two being partners for that long. So robbery homicide force for 12 years, had this same partner for, he said, 8 to 10 years, a seriously long time. He would basically tell the harrowing story of being called out to the tow yard on September the 8th, 2025. He said it was a death investigation after a body was found in the trunk of the Tesla. There was kind of a bit of a strange moment where Beth Silverman, the DA, basically said, "Oh, what would you call a front trunk of a Tesla?" And the guy's like, "Frunk?" And it's like there were laughs in the courtroom. It was like such a, I don't know, rudimentary thing to bring up, but it was apparently very important. So it was important. The definition of a frunk was explained, and that was made very clear. So he basically explained that he spoke with kind of the local area homicide detectives. Bear in mind, he is in the Homicide Special Unit of the Robbery Homicide Division for high-profile and complex homicides. And this was very, very complex from the get-go. So they basically, he arrived at the scene after the local detectives had been called out to the Hollywood tow yard, and they opened the trunk of the Tesla, and they partially unzipped the top cadaver bag that was in the front trunk of the Tesla. Said that he knew it was a body in the trunk when he arrived at the scene. He was briefed as soon as he arrived on the scene and learned that that car had been impounded after being cited on, I believe, the 3rd of September. It was impounded on the 5th, but they didn't kind of ring the bell, the emergency alarm, when it came to the smell of the car until September the 8th, which is when the police were contacted. The citation or the ticket was still on the windshield of the Tesla when he attended, and he basically asked why the cops were called. And he said that the managers basically noticed a strong foul smell coming from the Tesla. They suspected maybe a body was in the car, and they called detectives, and that basically led to local cops, which then called in the special unit. So he basically explained that when he arrived at the scene, he saw the black Tesla with Texas license plates on it, partially unzipped body bag peeking out of the front trunk of the Tesla Model X, which was open, and basically took a look into it, and he saw a horrendous sight. I want to be very respectful, but I also want to give you all of the information, and we did see the images of this, and it was awful. He explained that the cadaver bag that was on top in the front, it was a dismembered head and torso, so a body with the extremities missing, no arms, no legs, a very decomposed head and torso. He said that he could smell the decomposition. Whole place absolutely stunk. They traced the license plate to David pretty much immediately, and they had the details of his Texas address very soon after they had actually made contact with this Tesla. He claimed that when he arrived at the scene, the body bag had only been partially unzipped by the initial detectives, and basically he had to explain, they explained why the trunk had been opened and why the bag had been partially unzipped. He gave a little bit more information about the body bag. So the cadaver bag or body bag that was on top, he had described it as black vinyl with kind of handles and straps around the side, basically. And it had one zipper down the middle, your kind of classic, emergency body bag kind of scenario that you could probably imagine. So basically, yeah, at this point, Beth Silverman kind of entered in the picture of the body bag and the contents of it. So there were initially it was 2 pictures shown. It eventually was 4 pictures shown. What I think I'm gonna do is I'm gonna show you a courtroom sketch. I'm gonna give you a trigger warning. You're not gonna see anything graphic, but this is a sketch that's kind of a very crude and rough and not necessarily violent interpretation of what was in that bag. You know what? I don't even think. Hang on a sec. Let me pull it up and just take a look at it. Okay, I'm going to show you this. I'm going to warn you, and this has a warning on itself. I'm going to give you a trigger warning. There won't be any gore. There won't be any blood. What you're going to see is more of a kind of very medical arrangement of what was seen. But if you don't want to see that, I'm giving you a trigger warning. View this next part at your own risk. It isn't what was shown in court. It's not a real scenario, but it does show you. This basically is a gist of what was seen. David was kind of sat there with his glasses on, emotionless, looking at the screen the whole time. He didn't look away. There was images from the autopsy, these were images, from his own photographs after he was arrested that showed his tattoos. He had a Celeste tattoo and a Shush tattoo. There were shovels that was purchased from Postmates, a fireproof cadaver bag, and I'm going to show you the next page. Trigger warning. This is just a courtroom sketch for documentary journalistic purposes. It isn't the image, but I'm going to show this to you in 3, 2, 1. So this is the next page. So this was, kind of images of the bags themselves, and we did see an image of kind of the arrangement of things that were inside that bag. The front trunk open, and we did see her fingers. And you don't see it here, but you did actually see her hand with the severed fingers that were missing, that were allegedly contained more tattoos. We saw images of the chainsaws, the blue child's pool, the burn cage, kind of image of as they were found. And I'm going to kind of leave it there. But you get the gist. We were shown these very graphic images that were much more intense and horrific than what you're seeing in these kind of reproduction sketches. But basically, they would describe the scene, and it was very, very serious. They said that the bag was surrounded by insect activity. They kind of described the insect activity that was going on inside the bag. So basically, they kind of said that really it was unrecognizable, completely unrecognizable. It was just sort of dark black mess that was inside these bags. You couldn't really make heads or tails of it, really. And there was kind of like a black garbage bag which was underneath the cadaver bag, and they said the whole trunk was just surrounded by insects, maggots, flies, larvae, lava, just all of this which was depicted, and it was just horrible to see. These bags were explained as being wet, not dry. There was liquefaction to a pretty serious degree. They said the drawstring handle on the black trash bag wasn't actually fully drawn, so it hadn't been kind of fully closed, or at least it had loosened up. And they basically said that they took these items out and laid them out, and we did see some other pictures of the contents of these bags laid out at the scene, or I guess at the medical examiner's office. I don't know exactly where they were laid out. But David looked at the screen the whole time. There was a kind of exterior picture of the Tesla with the front trunk open at the tow yard, and just the awful picture of the head and torso with the limbs removed, laid out. Just horrific. And you could see the tube top that was described in the previous explanations of the state the body was found and the clothing. It was exactly as they said, but I don't think anything could have ever prepared me for just how horrible these images actually were. And I can't even begin to describe how awful they were. I've never seen anything so bad. And you hear all these stories of David talking about how much he liked gore, and he was fixated on the screen. I'm sorry to say it, he was fixated on the screen while all this was going on. I didn't see him look away once. He was dialed into the screen, and that was even more chilling. Something I noticed that, even I would say David was completely fixated on the screen the whole time, but his lawyer, Blair Burke, I felt like even she couldn't look the whole time. I noticed she kind of looked down at her notes a lot. She kind of looked down, wrote notes, kind of looked away. I don't think she could even stomach what was being shown on that screen. A lot of people in the courtroom looked away. I couldn't see them, but I was told I was told by somebody else that was sat closer to the front during a recess that Beth Silverman, the DA, actually turned around and spoke to Celeste's parents and told them to look away before these images were going to be shown. And like I say, I couldn't see them where I was sat, but I can't imagine what they must have went through, even just being around while that was shown. I would say it felt like there were audible gasps in the courtroom. People were disgusted. I was sat next to various women, and they just looked disgusted. I felt like some of them looked really genuinely shocked and panicked at just how gruesome this stuff was. It was actually heartbreaking, and I've never seen anything like it. I'll never forget it, and it happened today, but it feels like that's really going to be that's going to be something that keeps me up at night, and really, really just I think it just goes to show, it's really just important that we get justice, because it really drove home just how horrific this crime was. This wasn't no gang murder, shootout situation like I'm used to covering. This was pure evil, and I'm not trying to make light of the situation, but this is like worse than anything you'd ever seen in a horror film or, a gory video game or anything. This was real deal life. It was worse than you could possibly imagine, worse than your worst possible nightmares, if I'm completely honest with you. It's awful, just awful to witness that. And I really, really can't believe what I was seeing. I didn't feel like I had to look away at points, but at the same time, I felt like I had to see that and see the reality of this. I've been covering this case long enough, and that's something that I need to take on board. Is it's all well and good talking about this stuff, doing videos about it, but when you're actually confronted with the reality of what this situation really was, it is heartbreaking, unforgettable, just completely the worst possible thing you've ever seen in your life, to be honest with you. Absolutely the worst thing I've ever seen in my life. It was so bad. So, yeah, I just can't even begin to describe how bad this was. So after that, we kind of saw more photos that were taken by the LAPD in the medical examiner's office. Basically, the detective that had kind of attended the scene and attended this part of the hearing, was asked if he noticed anything about the cut sections of the limbs that had been removed, and he confirmed that there was blue fiber that was found in those limbs, which we would later hear was obviously from an alleged kiddie pool that was apparently ordered by David and used to as a base to kind of dismember the body and try and keep to try and keep the blood inside, I guess, while he allegedly dismembered the body. So they actually showed a picture of the blue pieces of plastic embedded in those limb cuts, and we saw absolutely everything. We saw that. We saw the blue in the edges. And I don't mean to disrespect anyone by saying this. I'm just going to be completely honest. It looked like something from the butcher shop. It looked like a cut of meat. Like a large cut of meat you would see in a butcher shop. Just as far as it just was completely. You're used to seeing human beings in their normal living, breathing form, and you're just not used to seeing people just destroyed to that degree, to the point that it looks like something that has been. You get what I'm saying. I don't need to say too much, but the bits of blue plastic in there were notable. I don't even want to make that comparison anymore, because I don't think it's necessarily the right comparison to make. But that's just my honest thought. It just looked. You sort of just thought like you were looking at something. I don't want to disrespect. I'm not trying to disrespect anyone, but it looked almost like something from a recipe book, like raw meat that was being prepared or was kind of plastic, with plastic wrapping that hadn't been fully taken off of something like that was being unwrapped. Absolutely disgusting state to leave a human being in as a real human being, and rest in peace to Celeste. Absolutely awful stuff. But that's the thing. You were looking at it, you're just thinking, I don't have any. I have so few reference points for what I'm looking at. There were so few things you can even think. I don't even know. Is this really what I think it is? It was horrible. So we saw images of the tattoos on Celeste's hand, and it was the shush tattoo on her right hand. And they did point out that the ring and the left pinky finger were missing. And they showed us pictures of both the remaining hands, and the tattoos on them. And they did show us the hands with the missing fingers and the very jagged, cuts where they'd been cut. And we saw the shush hand on the right index finger. Sorry, the shush tattoo, and it was a very clear tattoo. Honestly, it looked like a fresh tattoo. It was very dark black. It looked fresh. It looked like a new dark black tattoo. It didn't look like a tattoo that had been there a couple of years and been faded in the sun. Looked very deep and dark and imprinted. The detective said there was no face or facial features to speak of whatsoever, completely unidentifiable. It was a really, really horrible moment, and then suddenly kind of we stopped for a morning recess. It almost got a little bit too much. So we took a break from that, and then basically we came back after that to continue the testimony, and it continued from there, and there were some very dark details that were brought up, and again, the defense kind of picked some very the things that the things the defense picked holes into were sort of quite surprising. They were things that maybe you wouldn't have thought that they would have focused on, but it was like they were just working with what they had, really. They were just trying to find and pick holes into the things that they kind of felt like they had the best shot of downplaying, really. And that was shocking as well. So they basically explained how after that incident, we're in the tow yard. The car was towed to LAPD headquarters, and they basically transported the decedent to the medical examiner's office. The detective claimed that there was actually evidence inside the car. They found a receipt inside the Tesla for Ross Dress Velest, and they followed up with the Ross Dress Velest location with the address that was listed on the receipt. And the receipt was dated July 29th, 2025, and they went and got surveillance video from that Ross Dress Velest. The receipt itself had a date and time, and they were able to get surveillance video, and this depicted David. He had taken the Tesla out for a drive to the Ross Dress Velest, and they got the surveillance footage of him, and they had a footage of him interacting with the Tesla, and they observed the car being driven through Culver City to a Ross Dress Velest and back to his property, where the car was eventually left. And basically, there's sort of been debate about exactly where the property was located, but this was no mistake. The property where the car was essentially found outside the sort of big mansion property. So from there, they took a lot of screenshots of the Tesla infotainment system. They actually cross-referenced that with David's iCloud, and they were able to confirm that his iPhone was connected to the car when he had driven it, and they tracked it. And quite chillingly, they said that the iPhone that he had used to connect to the car was a nickname. You can nickname your iPhone, you can change its name. It was called Tranquilizer, interestingly enough. So that phone connected to his iCloud account. It had multiple email addresses connected to it. They were able to kind of get access to all of that. But interestingly, they said they hadn't been able to initially find the actual physical copy of David's iPhone 16 Pro that had been connected to this car. Now, Beth Silverman had submitted photos of the phone and basically claimed that his iCloud account was used. They read out his iCloud account, his Gmail account, and other Gmail accounts in the courtroom, but I won't read those to you now, just in case. But it said his phone was last connected to that Tesla on the 29th of July, 2025. That was the last time the car was driven, and it was left there. And I'll tell you more in a minute. But they basically had an extraction report that confirmed that his phone was connected to that Tesla. They use a software called Cellbrite, and they basically sent a warrant to Apple, which gives them the full record of the raw data of everything from that phone, which they can put into the Cellbrite software that makes that data readable, and they can have a kind of full report on everything that his phone has done. So the defense kind of objected to this. They said the detective didn't participate in the extraction of the phone, and they said he wasn't an expert in Cellbrite. He doesn't have the right to talk about this. They said the officer didn't do the extraction. It made him an improper witness, but the judge overruled that. They said, nah, I'm trying to hear about this Cellbrite. So Beth Silverman asked how many times he's used Cellbrite technology. He said hundreds of times. Can't even keep count of the times that he's actually used the Cellbrite technology. Basically went on to claim that they have FBI and LAPD laboratories that they can use to carry out these Cellbrite extractions. He said that he sits on a board with other homicide detectives in other states, and they all discuss how they get information from different cell phones and Cellbrite services. And this Cellbrite software is used across the country. So he made it very clear that he was actually a credible witness on this basis. So not really much to argue with there. So the Cellbrite extraction was basically given in response to a warrant that was sent directly to Apple. And he basically explained how it all worked. He said once you've done that extraction, you can filter through contacts, connected devices, dates, times, artifacts. You can look at the photos, the videos. They can see that it connected to the Tesla Model X. They connected to the Tesla Model X software, to the hardware in the tow yard. And they basically said that this Cellbrite extraction gives you hundreds and thousands of pages of information. It's way beyond what your phone stores on it. It is like what the phone company and what Apple... This is the thing, people talking about, oh yeah, delete your iCloud. You know, Lil Durk talking about, delete my iCloud if the feds say they're on me, though. No, the feds are... And Apple is going to supply the feds with thousands of pages of information that's not even on your phone anymore. It's information they kept when it happened. And they said there was so much information just from this phone that they had 6 to 8 terabytes of data just from this phone. Your iPhone doesn't even hold 6 to 8 terabytes of data. This is all historical information that Apple and the cloud and your phone service provider and your Tesla, I don't even know where it's going, all right? They talking about, it's going to cost you more to get a terabyte of memory in your iPhone. How are the feds getting 8 terabytes out of this thing from a subpoena? I can't even download 30 YouTube videos on this bitch. I don't even know. So it is actually insane how much information they can get. They said they got 6 to 8 terabytes of information just from the iCloud, and that's just Apple will just hand that over. So he shared a actual photo of the Tesla's infotainment system. They explained other iCloud accounts that he had that had been connected. And there was one particular iCloud account that had the most data in it, but I won't tell you what it was called. They said this is how they found out that he took that trip to Santa Barbara in April 23rd, right after the alleged murder had taken place. There was basically access to his navigation system. He also found his way to a charger in Lake Kahuma and Santa Ynez Valley. And they reviewed neighborhood surveillance videos from his property on the 29th of July, which was the last date he drove the car. So he went to the Ross Dress for Less. He came back. They found a neighbor's camera in the area, which observed David parking the car, getting out the car, walking with his phone back right into his front address. And that was where the car was left. They basically said they see exactly where he came from. He passed multiple cameras. He parked the car down the street. He walked through an alleyway back into his house. Probably thought he wasn't being watched. Okay. But what happened is he left the car there. He was the last person to drive the car. And they even said, they showed an image of David basically walking into his house after last parking the car on Bluebird Drive, I believe it is. This was the 29th of July at 2:20 p.m. 2025. And they showed David walking from the car right to his house and into his house. Cooked. So pictures were then presented of the car where it was last parked. It had the damage to the rear trunk, which was still there and evidenced in the images when the car was found in the tow yard. They basically reviewed license plate readers and they identified the car had remained in that very same spot since the 29th of July to the date that it was towed. And people say, well, how does that work? They said, well, any police car that drives down that street has automatic license plate recognition. And basically, they clocked that car in the same spot numerous times, just cops that were driving through the area. Any cop that's got a patrol through there, that license plate was picked up. I bet he didn't even think that this much evidence was possible. But the cops could literally determine through license plate recognition that car did not move a single time until it was towed with the body in the trunk. And it doesn't sound like there was any opportunity for David to walk down an alleyway in an open street where there were surveillance cameras from the neighbors that were still preserved from when he left the car. The body was in the car when he drove it to Ross Dress for Less. Insanity. So, interestingly enough, obviously Celeste's father was actually in the court with Celeste's mother. I won't say his name, but you can look at, you know his name if you know the case. But apparently he actually called the LAPD on September the 10th. He called the communications line, and detectives were notified, because media and helicopters were there when the Tesla was still in the impound yard, and media kind of made a very big deal about this singer David, his car being found with a body inside of it. Some media even followed the car from the tow yard to the LAPD. And Celeste's father basically got in touch with the LAPD. They spoke with him through an interpreter who was his own son, actually. So Celeste's brother was an interpreter for the father in the LAPD. And he basically said, based on the media reports that he's seen and the connection to David, that he thinks it might have been his daughter in that car. So the father didn't know Celeste had a third phone number that a man had apparently bought for her. And basically the detective got in touch with Celeste's dentist through her father to basically request the dental records because she was unidentifiable in the state that she was found in. Celeste's mom, like I said, I couldn't really see her, but she kind of shook her head and sort of just hung her head and just was distraught when a lot of this was going on. From what I've been told, it really just sad state of affairs. So basically from there, they had David's address. They knew where he was at. They knew where he'd been staying. And that's when they served the search warrant. So the detectives from the LAPD's robbery homicide division, they got to searching the property. So they basically identified Celeste on the 16th. They already had David's address. And then they basically commissioned the search on the 17th. So they weren't dragging their feet like a lot of people thought. But I think we're going to hear more about why the arrest took so long later down the line. So they served the search warrant. They had many detectives, forensic scientists. They all descended on David's property, and they showed photos of the gate, the garage stall, the red Tesla in the left garage port. The red Tesla that was in the garage, was registered to Robert Morgenroth, David's manager and personal assistant, as he was described. There was a brick floor in the garage with rubber gym floor mats over it, and the Tesla was parked over that. Now, what was very, very interesting and disappointing is they did not mention blood found in the garage. Now, I was told, and I believe I read in the earlier paperwork, that they used luminol and found blood in the garage and the brickwork was porous and it had blood in it. Not mentioned once. That was actually surprising and disappointing and a little bit odd, if you ask me. That was a little bit surprising. Getting a dry throat. So that was a bit strange. I thought we were going to hear more of that, but maybe we'll hear more of that as time goes on. Interestingly enough, it's like they said there was like a gym mat in the garage where the alleged blood was found, but they didn't mention that. And then the red Tesla was parked over it. So it was like they were like parking stuff on top of where allegedly the dismemberment had taken place, I guess. But I don't know for sure. That was not elaborated on as much as I would have liked. So they found an iPhone in the upstairs den. This was an iPhone 15, different to the iPhone 16 that had apparently all of those terabytes of information have been connected to David's Tesla. They said they believe the phone to be David's. It eventually was found to have selfies and pictures of David, his own passport and driver's license on it. They determined it was his. They also said behind the piano they found that sealed burn box. It was labeled as delivery for Victoria Mendez, a fake name that allegedly David had used among other fake names. And they also found a PC Tower computer. They also found multiple email addresses connected to that PC, which were named in court. I won't produce them here. But they also confirmed, if you saw the video I did yesterday that got deleted, they said I was privacy and cyberbullying David. They confirmed the airline tickets were real. They said that PC and an email account linked to that PC had purchased airline tickets for both Celeste and David on the same trips, one from LA to Texas and one from LA to London, which was that image that we saw previously. I thought Blair Burke was going to say, "Oh, this plane ticket thing has been circulating in the media improperly." It didn't come up. All right, they just confirmed. Beth Silverman, the DA, assistant DA, confirmed that information, those flight tickets were real, and that was the end of that. So they basically said, look, we've got subpoenaed information from his iCloud account, his AT&T account, his Uber, his Postmates, his Home Depot, his Amazon. They said the Amazon account was granted under a separate federal subpoena. So the feds are involved in one way or another, and they basically said they got records of all of his Amazon purchases under a federal subpoena. Right, so they reviewed his Amazon records in detail, and they said that his orders on Amazon for the Victoria Mendez was the fake name that was used on some purchases. That was like a fake Celeste, and then the other one was a new name, a new alias we'd only just heard. Travion Davis was apparently the name that he was going by, which is interesting. So that was basically the conclusion of all of my handwritten notes, but I did actually have some notes that I typed up because I was allowed my laptop in the second half. So I'm going to keep going with that, but what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to split this video into two halves because I've been talking for quite a long time, and also I want to I want to kind of separate some of these topics so I don't get too carried away on putting too many things in one video. So in my notes here, basically, after this, there was a brief recess, and then the detective kind of came back, continued his testimony. The district deputy DA kind of continued grilling him, and that's when they started discussing kind of all of the stuff that he'd purchased from Amazon, the body bags, things like that. Now, I'm wondering whether I should maybe do a different video on everything that he bought off Amazon, because I wrote down as much as I possibly could, and I was actually going to dig up some of the exact same items from Amazon. So tell you what, let me wrap it up there, because I feel like this video is kind of just perfect on its own, with all of the details of what was found in the tow yard and I'm going to do another video that's going to go into detail on what was found on his Amazon account. So I hope you found that useful. Absolute utmost respect to Celeste and her family. Rest in peace to her. Just horrible to see what went down, but promising to know that justice is going to be done and the wheels of justice are turning. So I'll be back with another video. What I'm going to do, I'll probably do 2 more videos on this topic tonight. Then I'm going to go to bed. I'm exhausted. And then I will be hopefully back to it tomorrow. But we'll see. If I don't get into the courtroom tomorrow, then it is what it is. You know, they were very fair today, so I can't complain. So I'll let you guys know as soon as I know. But yeah, I'll be back with another breakdown. I'll do a separate video on a different topic, and then you can let me know what you thought of this one. Thank you for watching. Thank you for supporting. That is it from me. I'll see you in the next one. Thank you. Bye.